EF-1 tornado snapping 100 trees, producing roof damages to several homes in the Bellevue community in Brunswick County. And unfortunately, at least 2 people have died as a result of what we now know to be an EF-3 tornado in Bertie County. Dan, you were there. We have some of your video. I'm just going to let you explain to our viewers what you observed in the aftermath of what was a very powerful tropical tornado that this hurricane is responsible for.
Basically, I was expecting a little less damage with it being a tropical type of tornado. Here in this image, you can see that's actually a mobile home that is crushed and destroyed in pieces off of its foundation. I'm just driving along the road. Basically, the heaviest areas of damage where houses were destroyed were completely barricaded off from the public. You had to show an ID that you lived there in order to even get through. But these roads, such as the one in the video, you could still drive right through. There are power lines down. I saw hundreds of trees down. Clear damage paths where the tornado came right over houses and then moved through woods and created a clear line of damage through everywhere that it hit. I mean, dozens and dozens of houses damaged outside of the main area where the largest damage even occurred. So when I started seeing this, I knew that there was kind of widespread and wide amounts of damage. So long and wide. So why was this? And it was kind of curious to me. Come to find out, it did get rated as an EF-3 tornado, and it was shown as on the ground for at least 10 miles. In this video portion here, this is a commercial building that was hit kind of near the end of its damage path. So it did damage all the way from kind of rural homes out in kind of farmland all the way up to the main roads where they had commercial buildings, and it flipped a food truck, damaged some of those windows, roofs, and signs and everything else like that. Here we're kind of looking at more kind of damage along the side of the road. You can see these trees are just snapped off at the top. The power lines are down there as well. To the right of this frame, you see more damage to the trees. It really, the community response was quite interesting as well. It looked like a place that had been through some sort of disaster. There were people driving around all over the place. In this image here, there's a police officer in front of me. There were barricades set up kind of all over the place. There's people on four-wheelers that were driving down the road, I guess picking up other people and searching for houses or searching for things within houses. At the barricades that I stopped at and talked to the police officers, they said they were still actively doing search and rescue missions. And this was at 1 p.m. They had all morning of performing search and rescue missions past after Isaias had already left, and they were still performing them. So that gives you an idea of we're 8 hours into daylight and we're still doing search and rescue missions.
I do know some sliver of good news. The North Carolina Governor Roy Cooper addressed. There were initial reports after this tornado that some children had gone missing during the storm, and that later that afternoon they were able to confirm that in fact there were no missing children. And that is some silver lining in what otherwise was a very destructive tornado that did unfortunately claim the lives of 2 people. And Dan, you shot that footage, and sometimes seeing is believing. But to your point, you weren't even able to get close to the worst of the destruction because of the active rescues that were still going on.
Yeah, that's correct. They said that some of those areas may open up to media later on that evening or whatever, but they said, yeah, it's literally a disaster. And they were keeping people away from it. I mean, miles away from the actual major damage zone. So you couldn't even get close. And there were a lot of people driving around. Granted, a lot of houses got hit, so people's families were probably coming to help out. There were just probably random people who wanted to see what happened. And but it was quite the scene. Definitely a lot of people there for a lot of different reasons. And honestly, when I was driving around at this point, there was very little, a lot less. Let me put it this way: a lot less storm recovery, damage recovery happening Here in this, you see an ambulance. So there's a couple things here and there happening. You see one person maybe on a roof repairing some shingles. Here in this, there's no one repairing the window, no one getting up the broken glass. It seems like there were so many, what this would be considered as kind of bad damage. There was such worse amounts of damage that's where actually all of the focus was going. That's where the police officers were going, and that's where the emergency crews were going. So that kind of gives you a scale of how bad this actually was.
Evan Fisher, you've sent me over this graphic of tornado warnings. I don't know if you had words you wanted to share about it, but just the number of polygons on this map showed just how active of an evening through early morning it was.
Yeah, absolutely. By early morning, that front right quadrant of the hurricane was really going to town, unfortunately. You can see dozens of tornado warnings in northeastern North Carolina as well as Hampton Roads, kind of southeastern Virginia. Thankfully, we had a low number of deaths, but unfortunately there were still those two. So it's heartbreaking to see. But that front right quadrant of the storm, it's always the most dangerous for these tornadoes and that kind of development. And Dan was there to show us the aftermath. And yeah, unfortunately, we did see a decent number of tornadoes.
And to your point, Evan, that line on the map there really showing us how these storms happen in that front right quadrant, which is what we're always talking about in these tropical systems. Matter of fact, Ricky Matthews has a whole video on the Carolina Weather Group YouTube talking about why it is that they form there in that front right quadrant, and that's exactly how it played out throughout much of the evening. And